Recently, the Trump administration and much of the country and the media went wild over a guy who makes videos on social media involving issues in the news. His videos about Somali immigrants in Minnesota and fraud and daycares became a phenom shared by people in the halls of power. His name is Nick Shirley. Some people are celebrating him as a citizen journalist. But lots of big legacy media are saying, watch out, you can't just assume that what this guy says is accurate. And that's true, but also hypocritical, since the same can be said for big media itself. This whole story provides crucial insight into the news industry, which shapes how people view the world. It speaks to what the media ignores, facts it leaves out of its coverage, and rules it makes up in order to plant ideas in your mind. Today, I'll show you how the media has presented what this guy did and compare it to how the media handles citizen journalists it wants you to believe. You'll hear how wildly different it is and how this whole process leaves us all without the truth. Coverage of his videos also speaks to something else, something that the media is too terrified to even address. The difference between Islamophobia and the very important fight against Islamists. Meanwhile, a former big media guy, a former colleague of mine at CNN, who is now an independent or citizen journalist, joined screaming protesters who barged into a church in Minneapolis. The group was protesting ICE and the fact that a local ICE director also apparently serves as one of the pastors there. The result was mayhem. This self-declared journalist showed that he does not understand the First Amendment and laws about what anyone is allowed to do, including citizen journalists. I'll explain. Also ahead, an update on the uprising in Iran and how big media is contradicting itself. All that coming up today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. It is so great to have you here. I'm Josh Levs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact checks the news. You know, at the top of the show, I always like to share comments from people, especially people who are supporting the show in different ways. Today, I wanted to give a shout out to Lisa Schaller Goldberg. She is a paid subscriber and supporter, and she had told me she wanted to send me something she was calling a shalom sweater. And I said I didn't know what that meant, but it sounded great. Well, I received it and I love it. So thank you, Lisa. I'll post something on Instagram of me wearing it sometime soon. I love the ways you all reach out and support this show. Speaking of which, along with this show comes a newsletter that is filled with links so you can see the things I'm talking about for yourself. That's also a great way to support the show by becoming a paid subscriber. And there are a couple other ways, which I'll mention later, but we got a lot to dig into. So let's start with this.
Answer the question. Are there children? There's no children inside this building.
That is one of the videos from Nick Shirley. He posts on YouTube and social media, including X. And this one got a massive number of views. In here, he went to these buildings in Minnesota that are supposed to be daycares, and they receive public funding. He shows that from the outside, they appear to be locked up, and he can't reach anyone on a number listed on a sign, and he says no one's letting him in or giving him any information. Of course, he can't know for certain what's happening inside. There are no windows in what we're seeing.
Literally billions of dollars have been funneled through Somali-ran fraudulent businesses. So much fraud, it could actually almost replace the entire GDP of Somalia.
He is not with any news agency. Big media have been referring to him as a MAGA YouTuber or a right-wing activist. This video got a lot of attention when it was retweeted by Elon Musk and Vice President J.D. Vance, who said this guy was doing better journalism than those who win Pulitzer Prizes. The Pulitzer Prizes, by the way, are problematic, as I discussed in a previous episode, but I digress. So, when these videos took off, the big media basically did two things. First, they emphasized that fraud in Minnesota, among the Somali community particularly, has been covered for years. And it has. There have been prosecutions and convictions under the Democratic governor there, Tim Walz, and during the Biden administration. And investigations have been ongoing. There has been some reporting. And the media rushed to say, hey, don't trust this guy. Here's CNN speaking with him on the street.
How do you know that all the allegations that you're making are true?
How do I know that they're true? Well, we showed you guys what was happening, and then you guys can go ahead and make your own analysis.
We're coming so we can make our own analysis. Are you 100% sure you're true?
Yeah, I am 100% sure I'm true.
CNN is looking into Shirley's claims.
These reports then go into how some government agencies are saying they have checked, and there are sometimes kids at least some of these facilities. And in this CNN report, we see their reporter try to reach the facilities and check. So they're showing their correspondent attempt to fact check. That is literally performative. And that says so much about the media, because CNN itself says things all the time that aren't true, that aren't fact checked. I've covered dozens of examples on this show. What CNN is doing here is fact-checking this citizen journalist person in ways that they don't fact-check themselves. That makes comments like this from a CNN media analyst discussing this on air extra ridiculous.
Where I think a lot of folks in the media, including you mentioned CNN, which is looking to verify this video, are showing pause and trepidation around Shirley's reporting is just that making sure that it's actually verified, that it's showing fraud.
Someone please get CNN a mirror. This is the place that just tells you things that Trump or other government officials say without telling you what's true. It's a place that holds presidential debates in which they don't tell you what's true or false from any candidate. It's a place that takes anything Hamas says and just tells you it as though it's a fact straight up. They don't fact check. And they don't fact check other so-called citizen journalists. There's a CNN.com story praising the so-called citizen journalists in Gaza, whom the network platformed to say literally anything they wanted, and the network never considered checking whether anything they said was true. There's one woman in particular whom they adore. Her name is Plestia Alcalad. She pushed the hospital bombing lie, claiming that Israel early on bombed a hospital. You might remember that. Big media said that 500 people were killed, even though it's impossible to know right after a bombing anywhere how many people were killed. And then it turned out it wasn't Israel. It was a Palestinian rocket, one of many that failed and landed in Gaza and killed people. And it wasn't a hospital. It was a parking lot, and it wasn't 500 people. It was more like 50. But this person, whom CNN treats as a citizen journalist, never acknowledged any of that. And they kept reporting what she and others who did similar things had to say, as though they were totally trustworthy. Big media never told you that these folks can't be trusted. Tons of media do the same thing. They not only platform, but celebrate citizen journalists when they like what those citizen journalists have to say. Here's an NPR segment on gun violence.
With the depletion of local news outlets in some places and the move away from police blotter reporting in others, the task of reporting on crime has been taken up by so-called citizen journalists like Larry Calhoun, who started listening to police scanners and tweeting out reports back in 2020 when his day job as a retail manager was sidelined by COVID stay-at-home orders. Now he's become a go-to source for local officials and even journalists who follow his Twitter handle, DC Real-Time News.
Nothing in there about, hold on, just because you hear something on a police scanner doesn't mean it's definitely a shooting, so don't read too much into it. None of that. When I was at CNN, we used to push something called iReport, asking people to send in videos and images that we could share on air. And we talked about this as citizen journalism. There was a team that was supposed to confirm this stuff. Since then, unfortunately, social media has gotten so huge and big media has turned further against the actual role of news, gotten to the point in which they just put people on saying whatever and showing whatever they want to show without fact-checking. The answer to all this is not complicated. Big media should fact-check everything they tell you, information that they themselves gather, and what citizen journalists are saying. Everyone they present to you. Earn people's trust by being sources of truth instead of open mic nights. There is another big question hanging over this incident. Accusations of racism and racist intent. That's where we get into a caveat the media has been giving you that they rarely do. There is a 3-step dance the media uses to spread lies. In the newsletter, I break down what those 3 steps are so you can recognize what's happening every time you see it. It's a performance that swings public opinion and radicalizes people. That is just one of the many things you'll learn in the newsletter. It's designed to complement this show, giving you facts, sources, videos, photos, and more. Unlike the media, I don't expect you to take my word for anything. The newsletter is also where people send in their ideas and requests for topics to cover on this show. And there's another feature. Sometimes you probably hear someone say something that you know is false because you heard about it here, and you want to find where that was so you can send them a link. Well, here's how it works. When you go to the main page of the newsletter, you can type in any topic or the name of a news agency, just about anything, and it will show you where I have addressed that topic. It will bring you to the facts, which you can then share. I also have email addresses for major news sites and instructions for you to send messages to the leaders so you can let them know what they're doing wrong. The newsletter is free, but this show relies on your support, and the best way to support the show is to become a paid subscriber to the newsletter. When you do that, I reward you with exclusive content, I read messages from you on the show, and I help you save lots of money by accessing major news sites for free legally. To find the newsletter, check out the show notes or my website, joshlevs.com. You'll see a direct link. The newsletter is on a platform called Substack. If you're already on Substack, just look me up by name or by the title. They stand corrected. Thank you. In telling you about Nick Shirley's videos focused on allegations of fraud among Somali immigrants in Minnesota, big media gave you a caveat. Here's CNN.
We should note, Nick Shirley has previously posted anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim videos.
A bunch of news agencies did something very similar, generally without pointing to what they're referring to. A news agency called The Intercept did. That is a left-wing site. Big media do cite their reporting sometimes. The Intercept wrote that this guy, Nick Shirley, has platformed people who spread xenophobic and Islamophobic beliefs. They linked the word Islamophobic to a video he posted from Dearborn, Michigan, which is America's first Muslim-majority city. That link goes straight to Nick Shirley talking with this guy.
White Christian country. Our founding fathers' blood soaks this land, not for Muslims and Islamic jihadists to play their prayer calls where our children walk to preschool. It's disgusting what they've done to Dearborn, Michigan. They have turned this into Rome. They've turned it into London. It looks like another country here. Every single sign on every single street is in Arabic. How can you consider yourselves as assimilating Americans? This is our country, and we will not stand for Islamic invasion. They are here to dominate us, Nick.
Would you say you're a white supremacist?
No, sir. I am an American supremacist. I love my country.
Okay, so that guy said things that are racist and Islamophobic. This country was created by 4 groups of people: natives, enslaved people, immigrants, and refugees. That's everybody, all skin colors. And people of all skin colors have shed blood for the country. As for this being a Christian country, we're predominantly Christian, but we're not supposed to have a state religion. This is supposed to be a place in which people of different religious beliefs live together and work together and have the freedom to worship within separate religions. That guy you heard in there mixed together Muslims in general and Islamic jihadists. Doing that is false and bigoted. Also, having signs in other languages does not automatically indicate anything horrible. Lots of communities do that and are not looking to destroy America. What that guy said about jihadists and domination, those concerns are legitimate. There are Islamists working to dominate the West, including the United States. The media never tells you that. So some people hear what that guy's saying and focus on the offensive parts. Others hear it and focus on the parts the media refuses to admit. This guy mentioned Rome in there. There was an undercover report by the Italian news program called Fuori dal Coro, which means outside the chorus. They went into a mosque where folks told them what they really believe.
E quando siamo dentro la moschea, sentite cosa ci dice.
This guy says it's written in the Quran that we are going to kick the Jews out. The reporter asks if Muslims will conquer the world, and the man replies, yes, the first place will be Italy. There's coverage of this from the Catholic Herald, and I'll include a link in my newsletter for you. And of course, there are people here in America who say these things too. Actually, as I'm preparing this episode, I just happened to see the awesome actress and activist Deborah Messing. I've talked about her on the show before. She shared this video on Instagram in which an American Muslim activist is saying we are not here to get along, to be one of multiple religions. We are here to dominate. There are people who believe this. The media doesn't acknowledge the growth of communities that oppose democracy and support Islamist law and Islamist terrorism. Those are growing. There are communities radicalizing the next generations, and that's why the idea of assimilation is also important. If young people in certain communities in the West are being raised in insular immigrant communities without these other influences, they can become radicalized. So it's not a melting pot idea. See what I'm doing here? Instead of just saying, oh, that's so offensive and Islamophobic, it did include offensive and Islamophobic stuff. I'm digging into what that guy said to give you facts, which is what the media should do when they talk about anything. Anyway, in that same video, Nick Shirley also speaks about how we have freedom of religion in America, and he speaks with Muslim people.
In Dearborn, Christians and Muslims coexist, and we love each other, and we treat each other like brothers and sisters. So the fact that they're here trying to divide us from our Christian brothers and sisters is ridiculous. No one has supremacy over another person, and that's one thing that Islam teaches us.
I have a question for you guys. If America were to get in a war with a country like Iraq, who would you guys defend, America or Iraq?
We won't get in a war. That's not permissible for us. But at the same time,
who would you defend first?
We would support our brothers in Iraq. That's the only way.
So you wouldn't defend America?
We would not defend America.
These are videos. They're not journalism. No one is fact-checking anything. And the same can be said for so much of what the media gives you. This bigotry issue is a backdrop to the whole Minnesota thing. Most Somali immigrants are Muslim. Here's WNYC Public Radio, a show I've reported on in the past, called On the Media.
Simply put, the rabid national focus on this local story can be explained by racism and xenophobia.
But can it? The national focus is always on whatever the latest story is. It's not clear that this one got any more rabid focus than any other story. Obviously, there are racist, xenophobic people in America who glom onto any story that works for them. Nick Shirley has said he's focused on the actions of these folks he's talking about. You wouldn't know it from that line in WNYC, but in Minnesota, the vast majority of people caught in these fraud scams are in the Somali community. Here is a line buried pretty far down inside a New York Times piece. They're quoting the lawyer for one bad actor.
Ryan Pasiga, Ms. Hassan's lawyer, said his client had entered the social services field with good intentions, but eventually began to submit fraudulent invoices. He said she intends to plead guilty. Ms. Hassan is of Somali ancestry, as are all but 8 of the 86 people charged in the meals, housing, and autism therapy fraud cases, according to prosecutors. A vast majority are American citizens by birth or naturalization.
Note what this report did. It points out, according to the lawyer, this person originally had good intentions. Just stop and think for a second. When's the last time you heard a report say that about anyone who did anything bad and illegal? Oh, well, they originally had good intentions. That speaks to victim narratives and who the media wants you to feel for and not feel for. Meanwhile, news reports are quick to say that we shouldn't insult an entire community because of bad actors. They're right. People shouldn't do that. And the media should also explore how many people in this specific community knew what was going on with fraud. Tons of reports quote members of the Somali community in Minnesota saying, we're so tight-knit, everyone knows everyone, or everyone knows everyone's cousin. So how many people knew about this wide-scale fraud? I'm not even seeing anyone ask that. One more important point on this bigotry angle. While the media is quick to say that Nick Shirley has posted those things, the same media never tells you what so-called citizen journalists in Gaza have said and done. In a recent episode, I discussed an investigation into the BBC. One guy in Gaza used his social media to call for Jews to be burnt as Hitler did. But the BBC kept putting him on the air to give his citizen journalist type information. Another called Jews devils and less than human. He was put on the air 522 times. The BBC had every ability to see what these folks had posted, but that would have sent you the message that maybe you can't trust those citizen journalists. And when it came to them, the media wanted you to. Today's news industry brought this situation on itself. By failing to be a trustworthy source of truth, big media paved the way for people like this guy to say, hey, here I am pointing to things the media won't. Even though the media had reported on some of these cases in Minnesota, people aren't paying attention to big media because the media has not earned their attention. I believe enough in truth to think that if the media finally did what it claims it does, people would pay attention. If you build it, they will come. Hey, that's my ethos for the work it takes to do this show. Plus, it's a line from a great movie. Two countries are working hard to spread the kind of Islamist jihadist dominance that I was talking about earlier. Those countries are Iran and Qatar. The recent uprising in Iran could shift the world one way or the other. An update on that is next. As a rule, I don't do social media battles, and I encourage other people not to as well. They're generally just a waste of time. But social media can be a great tool to get people truth. In fact, social media is an important tool to fight back in the mimetic warfare and influencing brand connectomes, two things you've heard about on this show. You can find me on social media. On most of the platforms, I have my name. And since I am no expert at creating pretty graphics, I am happy to say that a listener to this show is now helping me with the content I'm sharing on Instagram. He is at Gabe Draws, Gabe Draws. He is awesome. Thank you, Gabe. So if you are on social media platforms, find me at Josh Lebs. You will see that sometimes somebody posts a lie and I reply and I say, that's factually untrue. Here are some facts. But that's not a battle because I don't go back and look at whether they even replied to that. So not wasting my time on that. Focusing on putting this together for you. But I see your shares, your likes, the way you amplify that content, and it helps drive the audience for this show. So let's hook up there on social media platforms at Josh Lebs, JOSHLEVS. We don't know how many people have been killed in Iran as brave demonstrators rise up again to demand an end to the brutal, backward Islamic regime that controls their lives. There are suggestions from some protesters that it's well into the tens of thousands, but we don't know. See how that works? That's what the media should tell you when they can't possibly know a death toll. That part was also true for Gaza throughout Gaza's war against Israel, but the mainstream media instead took whatever number Hamas claimed and called it a fact. Hamas is backed by Iran, so the media was happy to do Iran's bidding for it. But now that Iran is killing apparently huge numbers of people, the media is acknowledging that they don't know. Also, as I reported last week, the media has been burying the story. Citizen journalists are managing to get out some videos and clips from Iran. I can't authenticate them. The ones I've seen are believable. There's no limit to what the Iranian government does to crush protests. Meanwhile, back in Minneapolis, there's a new uproar now involving something that some people call citizen journalism. Don Lemon, my former colleague at CNN, runs his own channel now on social media. He went along with a group of anti-ICE protesters when they barged into a church.
So right now it's kind of mayhem in here.
This group of protesters said an associate pastor at City's Church in St. Paul is a local leader of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Locals don't want federal troops with ICE there, and they have every right to protest peacefully. This is something different. They stormed into this church during a service. By the way, the associate pastor they were complaining about wasn't even there. You would think maybe they would have looked into that beforehand, but that's beside the point. Here is some more of what Don Lemon said.
We're not part of the activists, but we're here just reporting on them. This is what the First Amendment is about the freedom to protest. I'm sure people here don't like it, but protests are not comfortable. And there are people here who are, I'm looking at a young man who's in the corner. He's frightened, he's scared, he's crying.
Well, then how great it is that you're there with a camera, sharing it with the world. I couldn't tell if he got that person he was describing on camera in that exact moment, but he got lots of other people, including people who were obviously under the age of 18, their children in this video. This is insane and not journalism. The First Amendment does not entitle you to barge into a private place, including a church, to protest. By that argument, people could enter your house, your private property, wherever they want, and then someone calling themselves a journalist could come in and broadcast from your private space to the world. Then there's this crazy line.
The civil rights movement was about these very kinds of protests, and for some reason, in our modern era, people think that in order to have protests, you got to be cordoned off to a certain area.
During the civil rights movement, there were some kneel-ins at churches in which people generally would go to segregated churches, ask to be let in, and if they were let in, they would kneel silently, or when not allowed in, they did so outside. Anything remotely like that in the civil rights movement was an exception. Yes, there were loud protests, and generally they took place in public spaces. When people went into segregated restaurants, they generally sat there and refused to budge. They were silent, and that is incredibly brave. Who thinks that this is what the civil rights era was all about? Then he said this.
And that's what I believe when I say everyone has to be willing to sacrifice something. You have to make people uncomfortable in these times. If you see how uncomfortably and how harsh people are being treated on the streets, you have to be willing to go into places and disrupt and make people uncomfortable. That is what this country is about.
No, it isn't. Protest within the law. And no, you can't barge into a private place. That is also part of what our country is about. Some people are pointing out that the same groups supporting this church incident, some of these same groups on the left freaked out about federal agents going undercover in mosques to look for jihadists. There was all this talk at the time about religious institutions being sacred. Somehow, the same groups don't think that this is sacred. Now there's talk of possible prosecutions of this group and Lemon. There is a specific federal law that can come into play here. It's one that the political left usually supports, at least used to. It's known as the FACE law. That's an acronym for Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances. I know that sounds like I just switched to a different topic, but welcome to how laws are made. That law protects entrances to reproductive health clinics. It also protects people at worship services. I looked up the language of the law. You cannot use force, threat of force, or physical obstruction to intentionally injure, intimidate, or interfere with, or attempt to injure, intimidate, or interfere with any person lawfully exercising or seeking to exercise the First Amendment right of religious freedom at a place of worship. So, what Lemon is claiming is protected by the First Amendment. It might be, according to our laws, a straight-up violation of First Amendment protections. As soon as this whole thing happened, I heard about it from listeners. There is so much wrong with what he did there, and it is way worse than what Nick Shirley did by going up to some buildings and saying they won't take my calls, and there doesn't seem to be anyone here. But has mainstream media called out Lemon on this? Generally, no. Citizen journalism can be important and powerful, but it's only journalism when it works to provide you truths that matter. None of this justifies what ICE is doing. A lot of what's happening in American cities by these ICE agents is awful. There are people being rounded up or forced to show papers because of what they're wearing or where they are. That can straight up violate constitutional protections, including against unreasonable search and seizure without warrants. Protections, by the way, that apply to non-citizens as well. Those who wish to protest, absolutely, do so legally. When media figures tell you it's okay to barge into a church, everyone at every kind of religious institution or other private place is in a new kind of danger. It's not lost on me that I can be seen as a citizen journalist. I knew when I left CNN that I can be a much better truth teller when I'm out from under big media, obviously. But unlike people searching to brand themselves, and as I discussed last week, capitalize on your anger, I'm focused on getting you facts, fact-checked information. Sometimes it feels like just a drop in an ocean of content, but then there are these moments when I hear from you all and get support from you and realize that you're there, you're listening, you're supporting. And as you probably know by now, if I get anything wrong, I love to hear from you about that too. Tell me, and I'll do a segment called I Stand Corrected. There are two great ways to get in touch with me. The best is through the newsletter, and the second is through a form at my website. As always, thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.